We've got Jacob in Illinois. You're on with David and Matt. How are you?
Hi. So I'm a really big fan of you, Matt. I've been super binging your videos for like the past few weeks because I realized the only reason that I was still following the religion that I was following was out of fear. And that's not really a healthy thing to believe in something for. So, but I haven't become fully atheist because I think that we kind of have a conscience. Like, okay, so I think that the whole world is connected in some way. Like, I've watched a few testimonies, which I'm sure you probably watched them before too, and they have explained what has happened in their brain when they were in a coma, and they said that they've had these experiences that happen to also be in the Bible, saying, but they didn't even read that part. So I was like, that could be possibly true. You know what I'm saying? You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd probably need something more specific, but if we want to talk about it in general terms, my question for anything that's like near death or coma, or when you talk about a brain remembering things that are happening, part of it is how much that's constructed after the fact by the brain, like, oh, I'm missing some time, I need to make some sort of story up, and how much of it is bits and pieces of what we just generally experience, because being unconscious is not the same as being dead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the testimony that I saw was there was this man who went into a coma, and in the experience, he said that he saw these animals next to God that had eyes all over them, but he had never read that in the Bible. So that was something that kind of convinced me that it could be real.
If I can jump in, I mean, you said that you feel like everything is connected. Well, yeah, everything is connected. We're all made of atoms, molecules, and bound by the forces of nature as we understand them. So I don't have a problem with that. Maybe you would have to clarify that for me as to see if you see it differently than I do. And yeah, brains that go into comas, and yeah, there's a lot of research into this that show, or people that have near-death experiences, as you know, if you want to call it that. It has different terminology in the literature, but people tend to have universal experiences because we all tend to have universal experiences when the brain is under the same influences, right? So you drink alcohol and you'll have the same experience that somebody has that had in 1851, and the same experience somebody will have in 2051, and the same experience people have all over the world geographically, because brains are broadly very similar. And I would imagine if people had experiences in ancient times, in ancient texts, their experiences were also similar. So the question would be, from the perspective of, you know, neuroscience and psychology, what is driving that experience? And just because people have similar subjective, personal, anecdotal accounts doesn't necessarily mean that we can make the great leap as to the explanation behind whether things are happening. So am I on the right track with you there?
Yeah, so you're saying the people who wrote the Bible had a similar experience, but that doesn't make it real.
Well, it's real in the sense that it happened, but the way they're explaining it, their like rationalization of it, the story they're creating from it, is going to be bound by what they understood in that time period and their own personal experience. So, and also their own personal expertise on the matter. So it's not saying it didn't happen. It's saying it may not. The leap that's being made, the narrative that's being constructed, is something we'd have to test.
Right. Okay. So
there is another aspect of this too that I figured I'd jump in with. Let me put my magician's hat back on. You seem to be somewhat impressed with the fact that this guy described something which, to your understanding, is in the Bible, and yet hadn't actually read that part of the Bible. And I don't ever find things like that remotely impressive, because people will describe their alien abduction stories, and their description of aliens will be similar, even if they haven't seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or even if, you know, they haven't. The world we live in, these stories are shared and told, and it's entirely possible that somebody could have heard these sorts of stories or seen something without being aware of it, without ever going near the Bible as a source. That there's something in the back of their mind that's just been sitting there percolating, and then when they have this sort of experience, their brain fills in with whatever details it can muster from what it thinks it's supposed to do. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying I don't know how we can rule that out. And that's why I'm not impressed when somebody says, oh, I saw this, even though I've never read the Bible. Well, first of all, why would you say I've never read the Bible? I mean,
Okay.
clearly you knew that the person knew that this was something that was in the Bible. There's no reason for them to deny it. So
Well, his father was a preacher. So like,
his father was a preacher. Doesn't that make it even less impressive that he,
Well, but he made it sound like he didn't know that specific part of the Bible, which is why I was impressed.
I don't believe him. I genuinely don't believe him. I don't believe there's somebody with a pastor as a father who hasn't bothered to read the Bible and yet has a vision that matches something in the Bible, and then we're supposed to act surprised. I mean, he grew up around this stuff. How could you not be in a house where your father's practicing sermons and things?
Yeah. But I could give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, the story of the serpent appears across all sorts of religious texts, and that's because, and I would reason to say that, I mean, ancient people had to worry about snakes. And so it's going to pop up in your mythology. So either way, it doesn't lend credit to it, is what I would say.
Yeah. And even if we believed that this person had this particular vision, the question then still exists. Does that vision tell us anything at all about whether or not the religious iconography that is there is tied to something that's real and true outside of us? It's already tied to us. We are similar brains addressing similar problems and trying to come up with solutions and explanations. So yeah, I'm with David in that it may not be surprising that somebody, in the first century had a similar vision or experience to somebody in the 21st century. I'm also not surprised that, a preacher's kid might have gleaned some bit of information. But at the end of the day, even if the story were straight up, like someone who had never been around religion of any type, had an experience that was consistent, or vision that was consistent with some religion, that still doesn't tell us whether or not that religion's true.
Okay. The next thing, I agree with you. The next thing I wanted to get into was how conscious, right? So I feel like conscious beyond our emotions and our physical state is not a real thing. Does that make sense?
So far, yeah. You're talking about consciousness. I understand. Is there a question?
So I think that we should believe in those things as things that are beyond what science says that they are, in order for us
believe in what things?
Our emotions as coming from someplace else than our brains.
Okay, so you think that we should believe that our emotions come from something other than our brains? What are the potential candidate explanations, and why would we not attribute it to the brain? Because as far as I'm aware, all the available evidence shows that my brain is the thing that produces my emotions. And this is fungible and manipulated. You can manipulate this by electric probes in the brain to make you feel certain things. So what's your reason for thinking that we should just disregard that and believe that there's something beyond our brain?
Because I feel like that's what has pushed a lot of societies to even make communities and things like that in the past. So I think it's like, I believe in belief, I guess.
I want to just clarify you for a second so that we don't get you wrong. Are you making the claim that emotions are generated outside of the brain and we experience them from some source other than the neural networks inside of our brain and inside of our skull? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that they could possibly come from someplace else and it's manifested in our brains.
But your reason for saying that, based on what you said a moment ago, is that you believe in the power of belief. You believe that if people believe that their emotions comes from outside of them, that would be an inspiring thing for people, right?
Yes.
It's not inspiring for me at all. I mean, it might inspire me to try to find out whether or not it's true. But at the end of the day,
my question would be, why do you think that?
Because I think that you don't feel that way, that it's inspiring, because you know so much about science. But most people aren't interested in studying a lot. So there's something that's like an outer source for other people.
Well, emotions could come from outside the brain. It's possible, but how would we determine that? Is what my question is. How would we decide? How would we actually create a body of evidence to determine whether or not that was true?
I don't think we can. I just think that it's beneficial for us to believe that it is something outside.
So would you be okay then with encouraging beliefs that you knew weren't true just because you felt they were beneficial to people?
In this sense, yeah, but can you give an example where that would be problematic?
I can't give an example where it wouldn't be problematic, because whatever the truth is, whatever it is that people, so you're basically saying that you're willing to believe something irrespective of the evidence for it, and instead basing your belief based on the utility of the outcome that you see. But the thing is, if you inspire people with a lie, why couldn't you inspire them with the truth? Because let's say, I've joked before that prayer works, because if you're in a cave-in and your oxygen is limited, if you pray and you believe in prayer, that will calm you down. You'll use less oxygen. You'll increase the amount of time that you have to be rescued. So therefore, the act of praying indirectly leads to an increase in the likelihood that you're going to be rescued. Now, if you understand that that's the case, then you don't need the prayer part. You can just calmly use less oxygen. Now, maybe that humans are fundamentally incapable of doing that there may be a scenario where they need the comforting and compelling lie, where they need the parent sitting there saying, go for it, you can do whatever you want, which is a lie that parents tell their kid all that. You can grow up to be anything you want. No, you can't. It's just not realistic. What they're saying is, we don't know what you're going to grow up to be, and we're going to encourage you to keep trying everything you can so you can find what works best for you. That is not a lie. To say that we should encourage people to think that emotions come from outside their brain when all the evidence is to the contrary, and your reason is because people don't know enough about science, why isn't the solution teach them more about science?
Because I don't think enough people trust science as something that's liable for for every generation of humans. Like I don't think that everyone is gonna buy science just because people don't like believing in things that are factual.
Well, let's take the word science out of it and just replace it with truth, right? Or accuracy. I'm interested to know, what is your opinion when it comes to how much of our day-to-day understanding of ourselves and the reality and the context with which we move in should be as close to the factual truth as it can be? Are you making a case that it's better to live in a world of myth and mythology, regardless of the underlying fundamental objective truth underneath it? I'm just trying to get a wrestle of if we can take science out of the picture and just say we're talking about what is and is not true. Does the sun go to sleep at night? That kind of thing. How much about the world in which we operate is it important for you to feel is our understanding of it is as close to the objective truth as possible?
I feel like in the most basic form, I'm trying to say that yes, the universe just moves. That's all that we can observe, is that the universe just moves. But it makes you want to live. Well, makes most people want to live knowing that there's a reason. Like there's something that the universe is trying to get to, like a goal, But
there's no evidence that the universe has a goal. And if you believe that that's the case and you're wrong, haven't you wasted all that time and effort believing something that's not true?
I suppose so. That makes sense.
I mean, wouldn't you also want to know the very claim you just made was true or false?
Yeah, it's like everything you've said, and I'm trying to pay close attention. You keep saying, I feel like. And so you're basically using what limited data you might have. I don't know if you've done any research in this area into how people aren't keen with science. I think generally people are fine with science until the findings of science conflict with something that they really, really like. And then their brain gets in this really confused state and they're going to have to deal with it. But if you are just saying, hey, this is, I feel like, I want to know. I don't, not trying to be a dick, but I don't care what you feel like. I don't care what your suspicions are about this. What I care about is what the data show. And, you know, if it were the case that, and actually I'll have to say this really carefully. If it were the case that the only way to convince people to enjoy a decent, productive life was to give them some fundamental lie, I'm still not sure that I could support giving them the fundamental lie.
Why is that?
Because I value the truth. Because nobody's been able to demonstrate to me that there is something wrong with the truth. Like, if I'm planning out how I'm going to live my next year, and I'm convinced that God has a plan for me and I'm going to be coming into a lot of money, is that a wise thing? Is that a wise way for me to plan my year? I don't think so.
Well, I do know some people who do that, and it turns out right. But I guess it's not the most wise way.
Okay, some people it may turn out right, and some people it's not. So,
yeah, and there's also a meta level of this. I mean, I can't help but do that, and it may be like a waste of time to say it, but you're making a claim that I mean, you may not be making this claim, but we're sort of just having a little chit chat about it, which is that there may be cases in which it's more beneficial, whatever that means, to believe in a lie than it is to believe in the truth. But that claim itself is something that would need to be tested, right? Like if we're to find out whether or not that claim itself is true, we'd have to test it using some sort of epistemological framework. And so what is the best framework to use to test that? And I would assume, scientific method is one that's pretty good. There are others, but at some point it's turtles all the way down. So we have to like dig our heels in and say, how do we figure out even this very claim itself that maybe lies are good sometimes? How do we determine that? And the only way I know that would really reliably give you evidence would be to toss it into the institution of science and see what turns out.
let me ask this, Jacob, if I can, because this might clear it up. If you had someone who you loved who was convinced that they had a lucky rabbit's foot that would always protect them, are you okay with them believing that?
Yes, I am.
And are you still okay with them believing that, even if if them being convinced that they had a lucky rabbit's foot that would protect them leads to them closing their eyes, clutching the rabbit's foot, and walking across a busy highway? Are you still okay with them believing that?
Okay, I see what you're saying. No. Okay.
Yeah. And while, it's fine for people to believe all kinds of untrue and batshit things when they're never going to be put to the test, but all of a sudden when the rubber meets the road, or when you're trying to cross a busy street, now people do care about science. And people care about science quite often when they are faced with health decisions, when they are faced with any sort of thing. We'll trust the data when our life's on the line.
Right. But I don't think there's anything wrong with believing in a higher power, though. I think that the problem is that that most religions believe in an unchanging higher power. Like, that's why I'm pantheist, because the universe is always moving. And I feel like we should all have some type of respect, or like some type of belief that the universe is aspiring to something.
I hear you. But if you're a pantheist, and the universe isn't actually directing it, like there's no consciousness to the universe that's directing anything, what does your pantheistic view of God do for your life or for anybody's life if you just believe the universe is God?
Well, it makes me respect everything around me.
Why? The fact that a universe is God doesn't mean that anything is deserving of respect. Doesn't mean that you should behave in a particular way. It doesn't mean you should make a decision. I could say right now, I'm absolutely convinced that the universe is a conscious agent, and it tells you nothing at all about what that agent thinks about how I should live my life.
Okay, that's true.
So now does your view of pantheism tell you anything about how you should live your life?
Not really, but
what good is it?
I pick my view based on what other pantheistic views in religion have, like how people think that there are spirits, inside of the sun or inside trees and things like that. They
Mhm.
they took well care of those things. Like they took well care of those trees because they had that belief. And I think like with the absence of science, if everyone believed that, then the world would still be intact.
Do you think that if people who don't believe in pantheism wouldn't take care of trees?
I don't think that they would. No, I don't, because I don't think that they would have a reason to. I guess.
You don't think that understanding how nature works and how trees are essential to keeping us alive, you don't think that that's sufficient reason?
Well, yeah, that is. But outside of that, people who aren't interested in that, I think they should all be pantheists for the reason that I'm saying. Like, you get me?
Well, I couldn't possibly be a pantheist until you were actually able to convince me that pantheism was true, because I don't believe things just because they might be useful. I will only believe things when I'm convinced that they're likely to be true.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you weren't always like that.
Correct. I used to believe things for really bad reasons, and now I prefer to have good reasons. And so I'm saying if pantheism is something that you're going to advocate for, you'd need to have a really good reason for pantheism. And just saying, oh, I suspect that pantheistic people are going to be nicer to the planet really isn't going to cut it.
Okay. Well, I'll I'll study on that, I guess.
All right.
But thank you for
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
do please take care of trees. That's really cool.
I'm a fan of taking care of trees, but I'm also a woodworker, and that puts me in a really unusual position.